So, Republicans spent more than 6 hours interrogating a woman who has never met the convicted businessman about a $20,000 donation she didn't know about, routed through a man who is currently serving in Donald Trump's cabinet. A man who has now admitted under oath that he did in fact vacation on that Caribbean property and was still exchanging emails with a man convicted of crimes involving a minor in 2018. And the committee's response to that guy was to publicly praise him for his demonstrated commitment to transparency. With that backdrop in mind, I want to show you a specific exchange from Hillary Clinton's sworn interview before the House Oversight Committee, which took place on February 26th in Chappaqua, New York. This is the moment when Republican Representative Nancy Mace of South Carolina shifts from questions about fundraising connections to Howard Lutnick, the man who is, as we speak, Donald Trump's sitting Commerce Secretary. And the confrontation that follows is something you need to watch for yourself, because the context of what isn't being asked is just as important as what is. Let's watch the video, and I will give you my take later.
Now, after Jeffrey Epstein was convicted, did it concern you at all that you had taken a substantial amount of money from Jeffrey Epstein?
That's an inappropriate assumption. I did not take a substantial amount of money from Jeffrey Epstein. So far as I know, Jeffrey Epstein contributed to the joint committee that was supporting my Senate race.
Which was how much?
I believe I was told $20,000.
You don't consider $20,000 substantial?
I do not consider it relevant to me because I have no recollection that I ever knew that he gave any money to the joint committee.
So you didn't talk to your donors that gave $20,000 to your campaign?
My understanding of the rules back then is that there was no coordination between the committee and the campaign. So, no, I have no recollection.
But that doesn't mean you can't speak to your donors. That doesn't prohibit, the law does not prohibit you speaking to donors.
But I didn't know he was a donor. As far as I knew, he was not a donor until I learned this in preparation for the testimony.
Did it concern you at all that Ghislaine Maxwell was heavily involved with people you knew and were close to?
I knew people that I knew her. Yes, that's true.
And you just shrugged, you didn't want to look into it or have
nobody,
any question about it?
Until her crimes were revealed and she was indicted and tried and convicted, I don't think people knew very much about at all what she was doing.
And then how do you know Howard Lutnick?
I know Howard Lutnick because when I was senator on 9/11, the firm he headed, Cantor Fitzgerald, suffered the greatest loss of life. As I recall, something like 650 of his employees were murdered by terrorists that day. Howard Lutnick missed being a victim because he was delayed dropping his child off to kindergarten. You asked the question. I'm going to answer your question.
Now you're going to yell
This
at
was
me?
what I spent
You're
my
going to yell at
time
me.
doing.
I'm a survivor trying to look out for other survivors trying to
and
get to
I
the bottom
was
of it.
taking care
You
of
waited
the
6
people
months
who
to
lost
get here today.
3,000
6 months,
lives
and now you're being
at World
defiant
Trade
and
Center.
indignant today.
You asked me
I have
about
met
Howard
with Epstein
Lutnick.
survivors. I'm a survivor myself. You have emails. You've denied that Jeffrey Epstein, that you tried to get Jeffrey Epstein to give money to you.
I did
but
not.
Howard Lutnick was
If
used
you
to
have an
get
email
money.
with me asking Jeffrey
I
Epstein
have
for
an
money,
email from Howard Lutnick sending it to
what's
Jeffrey
the question?
Epstein and his
What's the-
people to
I
raise
don't-
money for
I don't
you
know about-
for an event, an intimate event for you at his offices
Well,
at Cantor Fitzgerald. You're
look,
going to sit
if
here
you-
today
if you would
and,
let me
and,
finish.
and obfuscate and say to this committee, you didn't try to get money from Jeffrey
I
Epstein
didn't.
when
I
there was
didn't.
an intimate event in an email that Howard Lutnick emailed to Epstein's people and Epstein to get him to come to your intimate event at Cantor Fitzgerald, a very small event. And so I'm not going to public. You want to yell at me, that's fine, but I'll yell right back.
Well,
okay? I am looking out for
it's
survivors.
very-
I'm doing
look-
the job that you would not do and refuse to do as Secretary of State. Thank you, and I yield back to
no,
Congresswoman.
I'm going to finish answering the question, which I have a right to do. I am very sympathetic to your personal situation. I have read about it. I have seen you testify or speak on the floor about it. And I very much sympathize with not only what you went through, but appreciate your effort to stand up for survivors. I was a senator representing the people who were murdered on 9/11. Nobody lost more people than Howard Lutnick. You can say whatever you want. You can call him and have him appear before the committee. But I knew him as the man who lost the employees that he knew intimately, including his brother.
And he was a
So
go-between
I
between
worked-
you and
Let
Jeffrey
her finish
Epstein
her
raising
answer,
money
please.
for you.
Let her finish her answer.
You know what? If you don't want to hear what emotionally affected me, that's fine. But that's why I know Howard Lutnick. I went to the memorial service every 9/11 after the formal service was held.
I see what you're
with
doing here,
all-
and you're
with
obfuscating
all
from
of
the
his
questions. He
people,
was
the
the
families.
between you and Jeffrey Epstein raising money for your
Well,
campaign.
you know, Howard Lutnick and I did work
Thank you. I will
together
now yield
because
to
we had a
Congresswoman
lot of
Lena.
victims
Thank you.
to take care of, and we worked together to rebuild downtown Manhattan. That is how I know Howard Lutnick.
If you just watched that and felt something between frustration and whiplash, you are correct to feel exactly that way. Because the central claim Representative Mace is making, that Howard Lutnick was a go-between used to pull the convicted businessman into Clinton's fundraising world, is supported by actual documents. But those same documents reveal something the way that exchange was set up was very carefully designed to hide. Here's what you didn't see in that clip. According to CNN's review of Department of Justice documents, and confirmed by NBC News reporting, in November 2015, Lutnick sent an invitation to the convicted businessman, a man who had already been convicted of crimes involving a minor in 2008, to attend what was described as an intimate fundraiser for Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign at Cantor Fitzgerald's offices. That is real. That invitation exists. The question of whether he actually attended remains unanswered. But here's what else exists. Per CNN, per NPR, and confirmed by Lutnick himself when he testified under oath before a Senate committee in February 2026, Lutnick visited that Caribbean property in December 2012, 4 years after the 2008 conviction, with, as he described it, his wife, his 4 children, his nannies, and another couple. Lutnick had told the New York Post in October 2025 that he cut off all contact in 2005, saying, and this is a direct quote, that in the steps it took to walk from his neighbor's house back to his own, he and his wife decided he would never be in the room with that disgusting person ever again. The documents show 13 more years of contact after that, including a $50,000 donation made to a 2017 charity dinner in Lutnick's honor, and emails between the two men as recently as 2018. So the man Nancy Mace describes as the link between Clinton and the convicted businessman is, at this very moment, sitting in the cabinet of the guy who called this investigation. And here's where it gets really important. According to NPR, when the Clintons refused to follow their legal summons, House Republicans moved to formally charge them for defying Congress, a process that carried serious legal consequences and which only stopped when the Clintons agreed to appear. When Democrats on that same committee demanded that Trump testify, Committee Chairman James Comer declined, telling reporters that Trump has answered hundreds, if not thousands, of questions from you all about this investigation. When Lutnick's name came up, and committee members, including Mace herself, called for him to testify, Comer announced on March 3rd that Lutnick had proactively agreed to appear voluntarily and praised him for his demonstrated commitment to transparency, contempt proceedings for the Clintons, a public commendation for the sitting cabinet secretary. Got it. And NPR reported separately that documents related to accusations against Donald Trump are missing from the Department of Justice's public database, records that were never included among the roughly 3 million pages released under a federal law requiring those files to be made public. Ranking member Robert Garcia told NPR the missing files were what he called a cover-up, demanding that Attorney General Pam Bondi explain why those records were being kept from the public. The language you can use to explain this to someone else is this. The Republican-led committee put Hillary Clinton under threat of serious legal consequences to answer questions about a $20,000 donation she says she didn't know about from a man whose invitation to her fundraiser was sent by Trump's own Commerce Secretary, who is still in contact with the convicted businessman a decade after claiming he cut ties, who visited the Caribbean property, and who is testifying voluntarily with a round of applause from the same chairman who threatened the Clintons with contempt. That is not a both sides story. That is a one-sided story dressed up to look like accountability. Well, what does this actually mean? At the individual level, it means that if you watched that exchange and felt like something was being performed rather than investigated, your instinct is correct. This is what it looks like when the rules only apply to some people. One set gets legal summons and contempt threats and more than 6 hours in a conference room with photographers camped outside. Another set gets voluntary interview requests, press releases praising their cooperation, and the chairman publicly defending them on television. It's a little bit like if a bank hired an auditor to investigate whether anyone had ever stolen from the vault. The auditor spent the entire time interrogating the tellers and then handed the branch manager a plaque for demonstrated commitment to transparency. But I've never been audited, so what do I know? At a bigger level, This matters because the investigation that is supposed to bring accountability for these crimes is being run by people who have drawn a very clear boundary around who gets examined closely and who gets protected. According to NPR, FBI interview records about at least one woman who alleged documented misconduct involving a minor were not included in the file release, records the FBI clearly has, because partial documentation from those interviews was released, but the bulk was not. The ranking Democrat on the committee called that withheld documentation a cover-up. The Republican chairman said he was looking into it. And yet, the investigative focus of this committee has been aimed at a woman who testified she has never met the convicted businessman, never flew on his plane, and never visited his properties. And for what? Comer and company will tell you this is about transparency and justice for survivors. They will say the Clintons had something to hide. They will point to Bill Clinton's documented connections and the photos. But if this were actually about transparency and justice for survivors, you would not hold a closed-door interview and then release edited clips to friendly media before the full transcript is out. You would not threaten one set of witnesses with legal jeopardy while giving another set a public commendation for showing up. You would not be sitting on missing documents related to the current president. Bill Clinton left office 25 years ago. What you are watching is not a real day of reckoning. It is a targeted effort with a very carefully chosen target. And Howard Lutnick, who is at this moment running trade policy for the United States, is apparently not someone they want to look at. It is worth noting what Jeffrey Sonnenfeld, the founder of a leadership research center at Yale University, said about Lutnick's behavior when CNN asked him about the document disclosures. Sonnenfeld did not mince words, telling CNN that Lutnick was grossly deceptive and that it was not an ambiguous call, adding that any chief executive who shook hands with Lutnick after this would want to wash them afterwards. That is a Yale researcher calling the sitting Commerce Secretary of the United States grossly deceptive on the record. The committee's chairman, meanwhile, is praising him for his commitment to transparency. I'm not going to say those two conclusions cannot both be true. I just want to make sure you notice that they exist simultaneously. Here is where things stand as of this week. Hillary Clinton testified for more than 6 hours, denied any connection to the convicted businessman, and the full video has since been released. Howard Lutnick agreed on March 3rd, 2026, to appear before the committee voluntarily, no contempt threats, no legal referral, at a date not yet announced. NPR has reported that documents related to accusations against Trump are missing from the official record. Democrats have demanded Trump testify and been told no. A quick note on the numbers. When you hear Cantor Fitzgerald mentioned in the clip you just watched, Hillary Clinton approximates the death toll. The confirmed figure, per Cantor Fitzgerald's own records and Lutnick's own sworn statements, is 658 employees. A loss that no single organization in the history of the September 11th attacks has exceeded. That context matters for understanding why Clinton knew Lutnick. It does not change the imbalance of what you just watched. This is not about whether you like Hillary Clinton. You can have whatever feelings you have about her. This is about something narrower and more unsettling. Whether Congress's power to investigate is a tool for accountability, or whether it is a weapon that can be aimed selectively at political opponents, while the current administration's own cabinet secretary, the man whose name is literally on the fundraiser email that Nancy Mace described in that clip, gets applauded for agreeing to voluntarily drop by at some point to be asked some questions. The committee knows exactly who sent the invitations. They have the email, and their response was to give him a press release. The candle is still burning next to the newspapers. They've just decided it's not their department. If you found this breakdown helpful, make sure to like this video and share it with someone who needs to see it. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear what you think. Don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon so you never miss an update. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.